I am a philosopher, historian, civic activist, and fraternalist. I am going to share with you about secret societies, symbolism, and steampunk. And these are three of my favorite things, all summed up into one, and welcome on the ride. So, this is what you're going to get out of the next 75 minutes. You're going to understand why secret societies thrived in the age of steam. You're going to understand why secrecy was so important to these secret societies. You're going to leave understanding the basics of symbolism. You're going to understand some of the lessons that these secret societies teach. And you're also going to get some instruction on how to create a steampunk secret society for your role-playing game sessions or your fiction. So it's a lot of ground, so let's get going. This was my introduction to steampunk. In an era of universal casual wear, dressing well is an act of rebellion.
Who did the quote?
I can't remember, but they're part of this community, and I probably have met them several times since. So, steampunk defined. The prefix steam, of course, is the age of steam from which so many of our aesthetics are derived. And one of the things that we indulge so much in is the fictional tropes of that age. The suffix punk refers to those wonderful attitudes and commitments that were first coherently presented in the punk movement of the 1970s, and those include authenticity, that your life is a work of art, and you have a duty or a privilege to be the author of your life. The next is a willingness to break taboos and social conventions, a willingness to be seen as eccentric or weird by people who aren't punk. And the last is a do-it-yourself mentality, which of course, if you saw the amazing fashion show, it's like, it's all over us. And that is one of the things which encourages experimentation in all of the areas of life, especially around those that are outside the normal scope of scientific inquiry. So, just close your eyes, and I'm going to read you this, and I want you to imagine yourself in this scenario. The chains of expectation hang heavy on your person. The cruel, socially constructed, rankest categories of race, gender, religious, and class roles are so pervasive and uncritically believed by those around you that any transgressions are socially and economically punished, sometimes even costing one's life. Anxieties and uncertainties are all you are guaranteed, and in public life around you, uncritical populism comes so seemingly endless waves fed by specious yellow journalism. The result is, if you are allowed to vote, your political participation comes with the expectation of ideological conformity to seemingly arbitrary ideological amalgamates. A deal so unsatisfactory, many who have the right to vote choose to self-disenfranchise, while others, legally barred from enfranchisement, long for the same right so many toss away uncaringly. In this social Darwinist waking nightmare, you have always been told that life will be you against the world. And if you are to avoid the world winning the fight, you are told to use every other person as a means to your own end. In this world, villains are held up as heroes, and heroes are pilloried as villains for minor indiscretions. One of your best defenses against the all-surrounding distress in your world is to resign yourself to the idea that this is as good as it's ever going to be. But even in acceptance of the present order, that order is known to be precarious. It could get worse, it could get better. And you now ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? Given the constraints of your life, what can you do? Join a secret society! I heard somebody get the answer before I said it. Awesome. 10 bonus points. If public society is a dangerous place, then private society provides a refuge. But which one are you going to join? So, there's so many different aspects to this. I'm just going to take them in the order that I've assembled here. And the first is agency versus autonomy. Every person alive has agency. It is your ability to take action within the scope of your life. It testifies to your inalienable free will. Autonomy is the ability to act on desires or the needs of your will. Examples: a starving or destitute person has agency but little autonomy. A millionaire in a coma has little agency but a lot of autonomy. So joining a society, just in general, increases your autonomy in life. Fundamentally, if society tells you that life is a you against the world proposition, the act of banding together not only is blatantly subversive, punk, it also increases each member's chance of achieving something so long as at least a portion of that group desires the same thing. Put simply, many of us together against the world is a better matchup than any one of us alone against the world. Examples from the Age of Steam included membership benefits, such as most of these organizations had an on-call doctor who would make house calls. It's like, I've never met a doctor that does that these days, but they made house calls for the members and their families. They had old age, disability, and life insurance. They even had unemployment insurance offered through these societies, burial assistance, guarantees of care for your surviving families. The burial assistance is important because during the pandemic, we got a view of just how precarious life was in the 19th century, because that death rate we were experiencing during the pandemic is what life without vaccines was like for so many people in this Age of Steam. So the burial assistance, I knew people who, the only way they were able to bury their loved ones was a crowdfunding campaign. This was the original crowdfunding campaign, your community that you would choose to sign up for and be in alignment with, and they would take care of you in your time of dearest need. Educational assistance and improvement programs. All of these programs were paid for by your membership dues and brought the member autonomy in the face of that situation I was describing in the beginning, by providing a safety net that allowed them to take risks in an otherwise uncaring world. Then basic needs are met, it is easier to be innovative, be industrious, be creative, be productive, as autonomy allows makes one's agency actionable. So this gets to a key concept in civil society, which is subjects versus citizens. And if there's all these benefits, why so secret? And it has to do with the radical concept of being a citizen, not in its modern sense of documents like this establishing your nationality, but the fact that a democratic republic requires the residents of their nations to be citizens rather than subject. A subject is, a subject of the crowd, a person who submits to the authority of a nation. But a citizen is a person who is informed and engaged in their community, with the hallmarks of that engagement being voting. By voting, citizens are the source of the authority of a nation. If people don't vote, the authority of the nation is diminished. People voluntarily fall into the category of subjects. This concept of subjects comes from feudalism, but any government operating without the consent of its people is treating people as subjects. That is not to say that a nation with subjects within its jurisdiction is a bad thing. Even in a democratic republic, we have folks that are children, foreign nationals, disenfranchised populations, or self-disenfranchised, or the incapacitated, all who would be subjects of everyone else taking responsibility for the lot of life. Whereas citizens, being the source of the authority of a democratic republic, any private societies, associations, clubs, or groups that self-govern end up creating a laboratory for democratic republican ideals that teach their members not only how to operate in such a society effectively, but just how much autonomy everyday people can have when they claim their latent power by banding together. And this plugs into an extremely important idea for understanding both the Age of Steam and our current era, which is social capital, which is the degree of interconnectedness in a community. And it's the best measurement we have found empirically to test the functionality of a democratically governed jurisdiction. So lower social capital means higher crime rates, corruption, and partisanship. Higher social capital brings about social progress, reductions in crime, corruption, and decreases in social partisanship. Secret societies, as incubators of citizens, are investing actively in growing social capital. And this right here, this chart, starts right here in the Gilded Age in the 1880s and 90s. That's where social capital was, and people started organizing actively in these societies, and what it brought about was the Progressive Age. And then it brought about this entire age where you saw in the 30s and 40s growth of labor rights, you saw in the 50s, 60s, and 70s growth of women's rights and minority rights. All of these rights were coming about because we were investing in the social capital of our nation. And while a lot of people like to park Reagan right here, this is where we peaked out and it started to backslide because we stopped trusting each other and we stopped playing with each other. And even though many people don't know this secret, when you play with people, even if you disagree with them, you can still end up becoming friends. So why so secret? Put bluntly, any group you are a member of and yet have no say in, you're a subject, not a citizen. This goes for nation states as well. What this means is any nation which treats their members as subjects, whether they're absolute monarchies, theocracies, dictatorships, or any other flavor of kleptocracy, you will see them exhibit a keen interest in destroying, dismantling, or otherwise exterminating any association which allows its members the opportunity to self-govern. Because wherever people learn to be citizens, those same people now realize they have the power to topple crowned monarchs in whatever form they may come. And I featured this right here because several secret societies in the 18th and 19th century, one of the components of their degree was you would be offered the crown of rulership, and you would be rejected from that society if you accepted it. Because it is not by me, but by we are going to be able to govern this world. More?
Spanish Inquisition. Get it over
By the laughs, I think none of you expected it. Many of the church officials also feared their subjects would learn to become citizens. And what this meant is that if your church is predicated on we have the authority and you don't, if people learn to be citizens, they are going to say, shouldn't we have a say in how we run things? And that is a clear threat to the authority system in place. And so you end up seeing the Catholic Church in particular had a grotesque litany of anti-citizen violence, trying to put the genie back in the bottle, so as it were. In the early days of society life, secrecy was paramount. For the church or an antagonistic state, if they found out you created a dreaded citizen incubator in the form of a self-governing club or association, you could be censured, fined, imprisoned, maimed, or killed based on the perceived effectiveness of your crime. This is where the secrecy started. But as liberal values increased and greater civic freedoms were earned, why did secrecy continue into the age of steam? To answer that, we require a mighty Venn diagram. So we must honor Victorian Englishman John Venn and his famed eponymous diagram. Really strong beard game? Mathematician, philosopher, Anglican priest. The benefits of secrecy. There's a lot of work in this slide. It's like 20% of the whole thing. So I spent a lot of time over the past several years trying to parse what it was that made these secret societies and social orders either eusocial, as in promoting social wellness, or in some sense antisocial. And the best structure I've found is this division between the subjectivist and the objectivist mindset. One is subjectivism. I have subjective experiences and I treat others as having the same. consent is the way consensus community is built. Whereas objectivist, my experiences are objectively true, and I treat others as objects until they prove to have the same objective truths as myself, whereafter we can work as one. And so you can see that there are some overlapping principles in these orders. Friendship, the in-group cohesion, the power that it provides, and also the secrecy that provides the external intervention by those who do not understand the group. They get left out because they don't know of its existence. But depending upon which of these fundamental principles the group is hewing to, they either end up going towards a more pluralist viewpoint, a more freedom from coercion viewpoint. It's like, we're not here to coerce, we just don't want to be coerced. The power with others rather than power over others. It's the whole thing of you and me together as equals. Mysticism and esotericism are hallmarks of this side of the spectrum. Symbolism, humility, the idea of contemplating hubris, the idea of trying to act inconsistent with the natural order of things, but actually trying to understand them so we're effective. Engineering is an example of that. You don't want to build something not understanding the principles of what will keep the building up. Pluralist atheism and dogmatic atheism, I'll explain those in a moment. They're an interesting pair. So over here on the objectivist, you see authoritarian mindsets. The freedom to coerce is in, I would like to punish these people over here, and I don't want to get caught doing it. You know, conspiracy works really well for that. Then power over others, the domination. Religious prescriptivism, the idea that, okay, our order is only allowed if you are a certain sect of a certain order of a, you know, a Catholic version of Methodism or something like that. When you get prescriptivism, that's typically an indication it's over on this side. Icons and emblems. What's interesting about these is these only have one meaning. Symbolism is about the phantasmagoria of meaning that's hidden inside something. And conformity and saving face are the primary driving concerns. Down here, the way that atheism is dealt with in these two different concepts is really fascinating, because you have pluralist atheism where it's like, I have atheism as a personal choice, not a statement of empirical fact. Whereas over here, dogmatic atheism, it's the atheism in all things except for what we believe or I believe. And we treat what I believe as empirical fact. That's the indication you're getting to this side. And what's amazing about this setup is I tried to pair these together so that it shows that there's this spectrum, and most orders you're going to encounter are not going to be purely this, and they're not going to be purely this. They're going to be somewhere in between. But when you understand this framework, you can not only better assess any society that you're looking to join yourself, but if you're creating one for fiction or role-playing, you have an idea of, it's like, okay, are we going to create, you know, the folks trying to topple the government like the Illuminati over here? Or are we going to be the social folks trying to promote the local bowling league over there? So, the secrecy divide, very simply, it's like, over here's the man, over there's the punks, and if you're in the middle, that's the aloof category that most people tend to be in, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a citizen, I filled out my paperwork. When was the last time you voted? It was some president. So what are they hiding? So what's interesting about this is a lot of what they're hiding is very similar, regardless of where they are on that spectrum. They're hiding secret modes of recognition, whether it's handshakes, passwords. They're also doing something that we all know and love, which is telling our friends no spoilers. Because a lot of these orders have initiations. And, you know, if you're going to the Empire Strikes Back and you're going in and somebody goes, hey, everyone standing in line, he's his dad! Yeah, there's reasons why folks who have been documented as being killed for giving away secrets. So that is that sentiment of no spoilers, because what you want is the people coming into the order to have a good quality experience. And if you deprive them of that, they're not going to be vested in keeping the order functional. And it's like, it's the sharing of that that helps build community in a way that cuts across all of the delineating markers of our society. And down here you have sharing each other's secrets. One of the things understood in social psychology is that one of the earmarks that you have attained friendship with somebody is you tell them a secret that, if made public, would make you vulnerable. And if I share that secret with you in trust, we're building friendship. And what's interesting is these things like handshakes and passwords, they're not really important. You can look them up on Google. But the keeping of them is important, because what it's a signifier of is that I want to be your friend. And down here you also have in-jokes and of course secret plans, whether that's doing something like ambushing an upcoming charity ball with a $100,000 check, or toppling governments dedicated to democratic advancement. You can end up seeing that there is still a common denominator of having a certain element of secrecy across this. And then you have, in countries that treat their residents as subjects, hiding your identity from authorities that could seek to harm members. This is really relevant because 200,000 Freemasons were murdered by the Nazis. And part of the way that they avoided that was, when they knew the Nazis were coming, they would burn the records of the lodge. Because that was the only way to guarantee the safety of their members. And even though about 160,000 of those Freemasons that were killed in that manner were Jews, 40,000 of them were Freemasons who, even though they were of the master race, they refused to revoke their brotherhood with an inferior race. Therefore, they were murdered. So this is important, and may become salient in certain places like it is in Russia today. Over here in democratic Republican nations, hiding your identity from authorities that could arrest you, especially for using threats, intimidation, and violence against enemies. Think the Ku Klux Klan over here. So, identity and secrecy, more of it. You can see that there's definitely groups that cut across these things. These are different modes of identity in our society, and some of them are existential identity, which are identities you have a say in, like joining the Oddfellows is a form of existential identity because it's not something you're born with. Whereas objectivist essential identity tends to be things where it's like, we see you as having a race and ethnicity, you're part of a cultural movement or a region, and these are things you do not have appeal of. Where you were born is where you were born. That's always going to be a fact. And when people invest that with significance and take action around that, that's where you see more of these objectivist societies. Then in the middle, you have a number of these things that are kind of joint. It's like nationality can change, your culture can change, your religion can change, your gender can change, sexuality. All these things can change over a lifespan, and they can be more or less anchored to one end or the other given one's personal experience. So all identity groups, whether existential or essential, create in-group language to help them identify who is in and who is out of the group. This language can be implicit and unintentional. This is like the constantly developing slang on TikTok. Sometimes it can be in the form of slang. When it's codified, it becomes jargon. Sometimes it can be voice tone and inflection. I watched an interesting documentary on how voice intonation is a way that gay men can identify other gay men without saying that they're gay. And so these voice tones are sometimes very important. Like, for instance, in Masonry, there's in one of the degrees, the tone in which a portion of that degree is given is more important than the content of what is provided. So sometimes it can be body language, and sometimes it's written in icons or symbols. So even if even if you have an identity that's not part of a secret society, humans sort their experience into whether they are in or out. Wearing a t-shirt and jeans in this room would mean you're out. So it's just a manifestation of our human proclivities. So now we're going to break down, and this is my subjective opinion about where these societies were at in the late 19th century. A lot of them have moved about this chart subsequently. Like, for instance, Native Sons of the Golden West. It was a white supremacy group when it originally formed, and what it was about was codifying the narrative of how the West was won, and if you were not part of that narrative, you were wrong, bad, and ought to be sidelined or extinguished. That has fortunately moved much more in this direction and is much more inclusive these days of alternate narratives of more marginalized groups in America's Western past. But this overview captures a lot of things. Any of the groups jump out to anybody that you?
Okay, I'm pretty familiar with the Order of the Golden Dawn, and one thing I'd like to mention about that, it was Arthur Edward Waite's and so on and so forth, esoteric society, but there is also a right-wing supremacist group in Greece called the Golden Dawn. That has the same name, but they are two totally different organizations.
In the modern context, one of the things we're going to get into in the next few slides is about how there's symbols and icons, and right now they might be the exact same thing, but the context is decisive. Like, I'm a member of a couple of Knights Templar groups, and what's fascinating is there are all of these super right-wing Knights Templar groups that claim to be Knights Templar, but their tradition is effectively, I would like to commit violence against non-Christians, and this is a nice symbol to help cover that. So so parsing this, you run into the language. Like, I included this one because it's kind of hilarious. The International Organization of the Good Templars. And so, what does that mean about all the other Templar organizations? Oh, they're bad.
What does the M and the W stand for?
What?
What does the M and the W stand for?
That's, in the late 19th centuries, the M and the W indicate whether they were women's only, men's only, or men and women's. Thank you for asking that.
Though I noticed Oddfellows is still listed as M.
This is from
Yep,
the
this
late 19th
is
century.
circa
Okay.
1890, 1900. So it's like these things have shifted, like as was pointed out by the Oddfellow in the front. The Oddfellows now are all gender inclusive. Not all orders are. In fact, Masons, there's several different orders of Masonry here. Some that are men and women. There are some that didn't fit on here that were women's only members. Women's only orders of Freemasonry. So these are things to consider, because if you get to know the landscape of what was there, if you want to create an innovation for play, it's like riff off of these people. It's like one of my favorite villains in any steampunk novel is the temperance movement. And that was what the Good Templars were. They were the Templars that didn't drink! Thank you very much.
But the temperance movement also was women fighting back on the abuse of men being heavily drunk and the medicines of the past having extremely high alcohol content. That's all I'll say.
That's why you took laudanum to cope with that. So there's a lot of nuance, and this is a 75-minute overview. So it's like I could easily have written a book, and people keep telling me I need to. So that may one day happen.
Yes,
But-
please.
So this right here, we're going to get into symbolism now, and I've highlighted the Oddfellows here in green and the Masons in blue, and you can see that it definitely at least overlaps with subjectivism. And this is important because when there are subjectivist elements present in an order, even if it's mixed with objectivist elements, it kind of creates a gravity well towards greater inclusion. And sometimes that gravity well acts slowly, but this is one of the things that is a fascinating challenge in the modern context, because so much of what we're doing in historical narrative building is being accountable for the crimes of the past which have previously been swept under the table. But what we end up losing in that is the fact that a lot of those folks that were perpetrators of that violence, like one of the past masters of my Masonic lodge in San Jose, was involved in a mass expulsion of Mexican nationals in the 1870s from Texas. And that would be considered ethnic cleansing today. And just being open and honest about that is the way it used to be, and we have learned from that, so we will not do that again. That narrative is important, though it frequently gets missed because there's so much oxygen being taken up by looking at how there were things that we never owned up to because we wanted to look good and feel good rather than be responsible. So let's dive into symbolism. Okay, so I'm going to explore Masonic and Freemasonic and Oddfellows symbolism. My mind sometimes tries to get multiple words out at the same time, and it gets interesting. So to do this, acknowledging their special relationship is important because they were both functionally pluralist organizations organizing in an era where mere association with people of other religions could get one into deep trouble. But they both got around this restriction using secrecy and the trade guild network. So Freemasonry came from operative masonry, where they had an overriding economic interest of ensuring that all people who worked in stone knew how to do it. Because if a stone building was put up by somebody who didn't know what they were doing and it collapsed and killed those people inside, they were typically people of influence, and also all the other people who would be able to give you contracts to build things in stone would be like, we're going to build in wood for a while. And that jeopardizes your livelihood. So this was a key component of motivating these Masonic trade guilds to get everyone inside the building, regardless of their sectarian allegiances. And when you were inside that lodge, it was important to not let partial truths of engineering out, because partial truths lead to collapsed buildings. So they had this secrecy present in the trade guild, and they had a pluralist membership, and they started talking. Likewise with the Oddfellows were one of the last trade guilds to emerge out of the feudal era, and what they were was the catch-all for those people who didn't have enough folks to form a trade guild. So what this meant was that they were diverse people, and in the parlance of the time it meant odd fellows. So the benefits of guild membership were well known, so people in these corner case jobs ended up joining. And this attitude of, we take all the rest here, ended up building this functional pluralism among its members, because it's like, we're the odds and ends. Well, aren't we a diverse group of people? Odd fellows. So both orders being a haven for pluralism ended up attracting the attention of intellectuals, scientists, academics, scholars, and aristocrats who wanted to have admission, but not to be trade guild members, but just because there was dang good conversations happening in that refuge from the violence of society. So the Oddfellows, always being diverse, just remained Oddfellows. It's like, yeah, you're an aristocrat. That's pretty odd. Get in here. But the Masons, they were like, okay, we really don't want to bog you down with a bunch of engineering texts, so we're going to create some free and accepted lodges where if you're a person who's not a bondsman, so you're not beholden to anyone, we'll allow you to join as an accepted member of our society so that you can get the benefits of talking with each other, but we're not going to make you learn a bunch of engineering. So what happened was that free and accepted Masons became the term Freemason through portmanteau magic. So, so this is this one is like one of the most important insights I've had in the last decade. And it is the fact that the Masons, by having this focus on we need quality people to be Masons, all of their rituals and symbolism evolved completely organically into being a match for the Jungian archetype of the introverted contemplative. Somebody who is looking into themselves, saying, how do I become the type of person that can best serve the needs of my community? It's, I need to be better, because if I'm better, I'm going to be better able to serve. And then the Oddfellows, they had this whole thing of bringing together all the corners of society, so their rituals and symbolism evolved into alignment with the Jungian archetype of extroverted contemplation, the inquiry of how can we best serve the needs of our community. And this produced a connection because in Jungian psychology, human personality is recognized to have many different facets. And the work being done in both of these orders was extremely well suited to each other, hand in glove. So the point of Jungian psychological development is to have a well-balanced character, and by being a member of both orders, you are developing both the extroverted and the introverted part of yourself into wholeness. That's why you see so many of these dual markers on cemeteries all across the world, because people intuitively, they were never told, but they intuitively grasp the value of having both. So, symbolism, framework, humans. This is about the fact that a lot of the symbolism and meaning came from Judaism, because Judaism has this rich tradition of contemplation of text and meaning, and that brings about a lot of different paradigms of analysis, so many, and that entire page was just acknowledging that I'm about to super paint a portrait with a push broom here and give you a basic summary of what that means. Typically, you can go with a 4-stage analysis of a literal reading of something, the historical reading, like what's the story behind the thing, the metaphoric meaning, what's the metaphor here, and the esoteric reading. And the esoteric reading is, what is an interpretation that lends value to my life?
Just like a piece of wood.
And this is the interesting thing about truth and symbolism, is that it's true if knowing that esoteric interpretation makes you move towards the person you want to become. That's truth. And here's our favorite Venn diagram again. And why objectivists don't get the symbolism. So the man is stuck in iconography and emblems where there's one interpretation. That's that stage 1 literal interpretation. And it might not be literal like intuitive, it's just whatever they say it is. And so the objectivist community or person begins to allow alternate layers of meaning to enter their practice. They end up sliding towards subjectivism, and this was what I pointed out earlier. And symbolism in this practice is punk, as it invites personal interpretation. Icons, they only have one correct interpretation, and that's boring. And objectivist secret societies exist in a constant state of contradiction as they demonstrate the power of the citizen, even as they act to suppress the notion of the citizen amongst the people they consider subjects. A lighthearted example, eating ice cream in front of people, telling them that they should not eat ice cream, and if they have ever eaten ice cream in the past, they are transgressing the natural order and should be punished. Isn't this good? Hypocrite. So, okay, that's a reproduction. Okay. Objectivists don't get it. This is a phenomenally salient example. So starting in 1738, the Catholic Church condemned Freemasonry outright, said this order should not exist. And it's because of what they call religious indifferentism, which is a fancy word for pluralism. You two folks, you're a Jew, you're a Catholic, and you're a Protestant, you should not be friends. This is a subversion of the natural order of the Catholic Church. So they issued a condemnation, and various times it's expulsion from the church, excommunication, censorship. It's like sometimes lots of Hail Marys, but it's always this whole thing of you are not to be doing that because you are practicing being a citizen, and that is bad. And just earlier this year, like 3 months ago, the The Vatican's dicastery for the doctrine of the faith issued a restatement of the same condemnation of Freemasons.
Oh. I thought it was going to say reconsideration.
No, not reconsideration.
Dang.
You
So,
considered it and I was correct the first time.
you know, in 1868, I had this epiphany that I'm infallible. No need to have more conversation there. So, symbolism is framed by the question, what does this thing mean to you? And that meaning can be archetypical in the Jungian sense, or the meaning can be seeded by theatrical introduction, a ritual, where the seed of the meaning is planted in such a way that it elicits further inquiry into the meaning for you. If the ritual says this is the meaning, and if you ever transgress, we are going to throw you out of the order, that is not symbolism. That's the icons. So that's a catechism in the traditional sense of it. So this is more about how do we facilitate people growing into the types of people they would be proud of. And that fulcrum, these two words are some of my favorite in the English language. Edifying, something that motivates eusocial behavior, versus benightifying, plunging into darkness, an interpretation that motivates antisocial behavior. So what's interesting is that if you have an experienced practitioner of symbolism, what they do is they recognize that you are subjective beings, so you could interpret in any way. But a practitioner of symbolism goes, okay, is this something that would be benightifying or edifying? And a person who's a master of symbolism would guide the novice through that interpretation to a point where they would find more edifying ways of interpreting the symbols. So, example time. Let's go through the 4 levels for a few things here. We got the square and compass. Literal, they're tools. Historical, they're tools for members of the stonemason trade. Metaphoric, the square is a symbol of virtue, and the compass is a reminder to govern our emotions rather than being ruled by them. Esoteric, and this is one of my favorite esoteric interpretations in everything I've ever read. In ancient times, the world was seen as flat and the heavens as spheres. The square can be used on a flat surface, but not on a spherical surface for geometrical purposes. The compass can be used on both. Connecting them is a reminder to balance our actions between the needs of our earthly world and the celestial world. So the esoteric reading is a blatant call for trying to live a life of balance. And that balance, it's like, oh, is that between like ego and community? Yes. Is that between like divinity and secular? Yes. It's about balance. Whenever you create those different dipodes, it's about finding where that equilibrium point is such that you live a good life. Oddfellows. Literal. It's links of chain with an F and L and T. Historical. It's the symbol of Odd Fellowship fraternity and its trade guild predecessor. Metaphoric. Each link represents one of the principles of the motto of Odd Fellowship: friendship, love, and truth. Esoteric. Should an odd fellow strive to live consistently with friendship, love, and truth, the reward will be an experience of peace and harmony in their life, with that reward being a reflection of how strongly linked they are with others in this life. Wow. So it's like, you notice that the hairs tingle more on the back of your neck as you get down to the esoteric, because what this meaning is, it's not truth in the way of, it's like, let's empirically test that sucker. It's truth in the sense of, this is something we found that has a fundamental edifying purpose when people view it and hold it dear.
I've always liked the interpretation that it's like these concepts of the friendship and the love and truth are inherently entwined and linked together.
An odd fellow speaks in the front row saying that all of those principles are inherently intertwined. There's a lovely variant that shows the links connected as a triangle.
That's my interpretation anyway.
So, axe. Literal, it's a tool, perhaps a weapon. Tool associated with the warden of the Oddfellows Lodge. Metaphoric, it's a metaphor for progress. It is the means by which the forest can be put to the use of building civilization. Esoteric, in the early days of Oddfellows. The axe of the warden, which would be seen as a fearsome weapon to the outsider, would be turned on edge and used as a collection plate amongst members to aid members that were sick or in distress. Thus, a weapon of violence is made into a weapon of peace through the power of charity. Pretty good, eh? Memento mori! Skull! Time is flying! Sign! Everyone before you has died, so you're gonna die too. Death is coming for you. You, in particular. Your time is running out. Esoteric. You're gonna die. Perhaps living life urgently in service of something other than yourself might be prudent. The heart and hand. This is one of my favorite Oddfellows symbols. Yeah, it's like, what is it? It's a hand with a heart in the palm. Okay, historical. It's a symbol the Oddfellows use. Okay, that's instructive. It is a metaphor for how we ought to greet our fellow members and humans by making our heartfelt feelings known upon meeting with a friendly handshake and greeting. Esoteric. It is an inquiry into whether there are ways we could enhance caring for the welfare of our fellow members and humans that we ought to consider, and after due consideration, take action consistent with improving the happiness of others. For love to live in the world, our actions must be consistent with being loving. And what's our time?
It's about an hour and 45 minutes.
How much time left?
Quarter to 4.
You're halfway through.
Okay, cool. What? I heard a good punchline. What was it?
It sounded like a lot of symbolic answers.
The time is exactly now.
Well, these are all subjective answers, so it's getting very esoteric.
Is it hot in here or is it just esoteric? Okay, let's peer into the all-seeing eye. It's an eye! It is a widely used symbol of divine omnipresence.
Omniscience, actually.
Omniscience.
Omnipotent.
I got those wrong.
It's omnipresent.
Namely, yeah, it's like that. Okay, metaphoric. Divinity is in all things, so there are no things divinity does not observe. Esoteric. The human race is coming of age, and as such, we have been imbued with sufficient wisdom to govern our own affairs. This all-seeing eye is observing us, not looking to find transgressions, but rather it is looking upon us in hopes that we may continue to grow as a species, learning to love ourselves as divinity loves us, and takes joy in seeing our victories. That's what's on the back of the $1 bill, by the way.
Peace.
Mic drop. 5 minutes.
That's what they want you to think, man.
This, let's just do a couple of high grades on this, because what this is a Masonic lambskin apron. And you can pass this around. This is what a Mason receives upon finishing the 3rd degree of being a Master Mason. And the lambskin apron, it's an emblem of innocence in the badge of a Mason because it reminds them of not only the very, down-to-earth profession that they came from, but it's a mark of not only pride but humility. It's that thing of just reminding you that you took an obligation to be a better person. You should not blemish that garment with any time of acting incongruous with that obligation. So one of the things that I love, and one of these days when I am a past master of a lodge, nowadays if you have governed a lodge, you have the right to have any fancy dang apron that you dang want. And nowadays it's like, it used to be you became a Master Mason and you could get the fancy apron. Now it's like you have to have governed a lodge and you can get the fancy apron, and you dang well know Mine's gonna be fancy. And this is an example of the type of fancy we have. In fact, in our collection, because my lodge is the oldest non-consolidated lodge in the state of California, it was formed before statehood, we have several examples of aprons like this from some of our founding members that came across with them via the wagon trails or around the horn. So, of these symbols, what jumps out at you? Anybody see something that you want a little bit more delving into?
The side with the hourglass.
Rebecca's beehive.
The shoe.
Okay, we got a shoe, we got a beehive, and we got a scythe. The scythe was already covered. It's a memento mori that's shared between both the Oddfellows and Masons. I could have created a Venn diagram with all the symbols, but I didn't have time. Next time.
In the book.
The beehive. Beehive is used in a lot of different fraternal organizations. Most famously, the Latter-day Saints stole it wholesale from the Masons. It's on the flag of Utah as a result, and they took it from the Masons. And it just simply means that we ought to strive for harmony in our affairs. And that's it's interesting because that concept of hubris, acting out of alignment with who you are in the world and your affairs, it's this idea that if you have a coming to blows of somebody inside your community, you have to have the humility to seek to make amends. And yes, there are toads out there that will not make amends, but I just had a terrible argument with my neighbor this last week. And I was able to make that up with him yesterday. And all it cost me was a $25 See's candy card.
That's pretty good.
But in all seriousness, it's interesting how few of us act consistently with that ideal. It's like, oh great, I've just burned a bridge, I'm never going to be able to cross it again, versus, oh shoot, I lit fire to that, how do I douse the flames and rebuild? And that's what the beehive is calling us to do. Whereas the shoe is number 10. There's a biblical passage concerning the seriousness of proclaiming one's sincerity by removing one's shoe. And it's one of those things where a lot of these fraternities would take stuff from the Bible, frequently the passages that you're not talked about in church, because they're kind of boring or historical or just, not congruent with the dogma. And it's like, hey, you take your shoe off and it's like, I am sincere. You hold your shoe up and you're in your stocking barefoot, and that is part of the degree, where it's conveying your sincerity in pledging to be a better person. So, anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, one more.
I saw this in an 18th century aristocrat's chapel in his chateau. And what it was the compass and the plane with an eye in the center. And I wondered what that was, yes.
The compass, the eye, and what was the other thing?
The eye was in the center of the compass.
What was the other
and
thing you said?
plane.
The plane?
The eye was in the center of the compass and plane symbol.
What is, could you spell plane?
He needs a square.
He needs
The square.
Thank you. Okay, that is one of the things that you'll see in Europe more frequently than in America is the substitution of the all-seeing eye instead of the G inside the square and compass. Because the G, it is frequently shown there to indicate either God or geometry, but if you don't speak English, the G doesn't make much sense. So you'll end up seeing the all-seeing eye there, or occasionally the Hebrew Yod symbol, invoking the name of deity. And sometimes it's just vacant because the symbol is, well, once you know the symbol, you know that divinity is present everywhere, including there. So there's a lot of different ways of stylistically presenting it. Okay.
There's a pyramid on the back of the dollar bill.
Okay, when we get to the end of this, if we still have time, I will interpret the back of the $1 bill.
Isn't there an eye on top of the pyramid?
But how much will
Am
it
I-
cost?
Okay, so we're at the creative part here, and this is, I'm going to outline this, and we are going to together here create a steampunk secret society. So what you do is you have to create a story of why your society is secret in the first place, and the easiest place to start is it objectivist or subjectivist? It's like, are you playing lawful evil and you want to take over the world, or are you playing lawful good and you want to thwart the evildoers wherever they may be?
Number one.
Subjectivist.
So
Air pirate subjectivists.
we have air pirate fraternal order. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. We're going to get to a point where I'll write down the ideas and then we'll assemble this sucker. So then you choose your symbols, like a zeppelin, and
Nice.
look up common subjective meaning to those symbols. And one of the easiest ways to do this is the dream interpretation dictionaries that are available, because all those are is anyone who deals in dream interpretation will tell you the most important interpretation is what it means to you. But there have been wide-ranging studies where when people are, it's like, okay, what did you dream? Okay, it's all these things. And they do a bunch of talking and they figure out, it's like, oh, that means your mother, that means your cousin, or whatever it is. And they end up creating these dream interpretation dictionaries, not telling you what definitively those things mean. They're just kind of a starting point where it's like, okay, get the ball rolling and then start talking it out until you figure it out for yourself. So this is a really easy way of creating a compelling secret society in an RPG or something. So if you want a special meaning imbued into the symbols, one of the things you'll have to do is have a ritual. I played a D&D game where my Masonic it was all Masonic brothers, and the one leading it, he created an entire ritual initiation for us to start the game. And what was hilarious was the symbol of the order was a square with a compass in it, like a navigational compass. So
Subtle.
super subtle. So anyway, one of the fun things is make them odd, because if your rituals are odd, they're memorable. I ran for office, and what's amazing about the 100,000 votes I got, I didn't win, but people still remember me more than now 2 years after having been on the ballot, because they remember this mustache. They remember the fact that I dressed fancy. And it's funny how just being a little bit odd makes you stick in people's minds. So let's brainstorm some things. So we have here, I heard airships. What else do we want?
Octopus.
Octopus, yeah.
For the Cthulhu.
Okay, so we got
Lightning bolt.
Evil petting zoo.
Zeppelin for sure.
evil petting zoo?
I like the lightning.
So
bolt.
really
Uh,
just like
Sky
petting zoo.
people.
Some people you can't take them anywhere.
A navigation wheel.
Okay.
Ed.
A leech.
A gear that is a navigational wheel, like a little cog.
A leech.
Okay.
I like it, a leech.
We- it's like
navigation
for our
wheel is also a
purposes, These
cog.
4 things are sufficient.
The navigation wheel is also a cog.
We'll have the leeches in the navigational cards.
I don't know where my mouse went. Okay.
Oh, I've got your mouse.
Squeak. So right here is the dreammoods.com dictionary. I downloaded the whole thing. It's, where is it? 977 pages. But
There you go, kid.
what's fun is our first one was airships, right?
Mhm.
Okay, let's check out what it has to say about airships. Can I get a chair? Oh, everyone's sitting in one. That's a good
You can
thing.
have one. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's the right sort of problem to have. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so first one, airship. Okay, we don't got that.
Airplane?
We don't have
I think
Hot air
ZEPEL.
You misspelled Zeppelin.
I misspell many things.
That could be like a balloon from
How about air balloon?
kid balloon. Hot air balloon.
It says it found it 16 times, but Didn't go to it.
Wow. Look.
Is it still loading?
I think it's still loading.
Oh dear.
This was supposed to be high-speed internet, I was promised.
Yeah, but everyone's
Should have
using it.
downloaded it.
Well,
Can you, how about you try downloading it and then searching it?
how about-
Entire hotel using
this is going to be a little bit slower. I downloaded it all in order to speed it up, but
Carry it to the window.
okay. So
Carry on.
why did I download it? Because their formatting is jank. So
But how much does it cost?
it's for free. So balloons.
B-A-L. L.
L. 2 L's.
Balaclava.
B-A-L-L.
Okay, ball.
Ballet.
Balloon, okay.
Oh, look, they got some gold here. So, to see balloons in your dream indicates declining hopes and disappointments. In love. Okay,
In
let's
your
not go
search
with
for
that.
love.
Okay, dream that
Wow.
someone is blowing up a
Aspirations,
balloon.
goals, and
Black balloons.
Dang.
Ascending balloon signifies condition which you are seeking to rise above.
You're expressing a desire to escape.
Oh, I like it.
For a hot air balloon. There's a hot air balloon.
You need to acknowledge your inner child.
Wait, go back. Go back.
Okay, let's do
There was
it.
hot air balloon.
Okay.
Hot air.
Hot air
Oh,
balloon.
to see your dream that you were in a hot air balloon suggested it's time to overcome your depression. The dream may be a metaphor indicating that you are losing your ground or your foothold on some situation/problem. Alternatively, it represents the process of individuation. In your quest to
Hey!
Yeah.
Word didn't exist in 1890.
Th-
Need to
We
be
have
on
found
it.
our meaning. Okay. So let's go with octopus now.
the many arms of the community.
Having their finger in lots of
The
places.
arms.
symbols starting with O.
I bet this one's gonna be like a
Evil petting
snake.
zoo.
Wow.
Oh, you passed it. You passed it.
Long arms.
Octopus.
There's already the petting zoo.
There we go. To see an octopus in your dream means that you are entangled in some difficult matter. Your judgment is being clouded. Alternatively, it indicates you are overly possessive or maybe too clingy.
To see two octopuses in your dream represents a codependent relationship. That's rough.
So this is where ritual would come in. So the question is, secret handshake. I'm imagining fingers of 8. Oh, there's the handshake. We just found our handshake. Hey.
So I like the entanglement though. Like we are all entwined.
Okay. The 8-fingered hand. Okay. Lightning time.
It could also mean that you're a lot smarter than people expect you to be.
Don't octopi have multiple
Oh, they're
parts
brilliant,
too,
yeah.
so you could be full of parts.
And they're also able to escape out of things with incredible ability.
Well, to me, it's always meant
The
that
deeper secrets of the order seem to be coming forth.
And they can
Change colors.
squid, but it can shoot.
But they're like little and squishy.
Maybe
and
there are a couple different types of different octopi that represent different
Lightning bolt.
because they're
L.
different roles within the order.
Like,
It's like brains.
Shh, let him do his.
and we need to stop before we keep innovating, otherwise there might be a schism. Those are always bad.
Schism's bad.
Okay, so L-I.
No, I like schisms.
G.
Lecture to lip piercing, so it's page 2.
Okay.
You went L-I-G. Yeah. you
Liquor.
want-
There's one.
Oh.
Liposuction.
It's L-I-G. Yeah.
Okay.
Ah.
There you go.
I was rather struck by litter box.
Litter box.
Yeah.
Oh, you're too far down.
It's like near the middle.
There you go.
Up. G.
There it is.
Lightsaber. Okay, lightning. To see lightning in your dreams. Sudden awareness. Ha! Spiritual revelation, truth, and purification. Shocking turns of events. We know that there has to be a shocking reveal in the ritual now.
I feel like a lightning bolt is very dangerous for Sky.
Fun fact, if you haven't been to the Oddfellows table in the hall, they have some 19th century hoodwinks that were used for sudden reveals in the ritual.
Are those the glasses with the covers?
Yes, they are so steampunk.
By the way, to initiate a first degree initiation, that the candidate is blindfolded until a certain point.
In which?
In in a typical Wiccan initiation. First degree, the candidate is blindfolded until a certain point the blindfold's taken off.
You know that Gardner was a Mason before he created Gardnerian Wicca.
Gardner was also in BDSM. We know a lot of
As we like to say in the Masons Lodge, steal from the best.
Well.
There are many forces governing life, and dream irreversible changes. It's like the transformation of
Permanent
the degree.
transformation.
Okay, so I'm thinking sudden. We got this.
I'm thinking take the Jolly Roger and replace the bones with lightning bolts.
Ooh.
Classy.
Okay,
cool.
and navigation wheel.
Or just put wheels.
I'm gonna venture a guess.
One's destiny.
Can also be
Oh.
you make
Hey.
like, you know,
Classic.
it's similar enough to the shape of gear, right? Would there be some overlap?
It is
Especially in the
cliche.
steampunk style.
What?
It's similar enough to the shape of a gear, right, or a cog, especially in the steampunk style. I keep thinking that.
I like where you're going with that. So
What's the
it's like we got the navigation wheel, and we have the airship with lightning behind it, and there's an octopus somehow involved.
Don't think that's
Maybe as the airship captain.
Yeah.
But anyway, there must be an artist in this room that can make this happen.
Just mentioning something quickly. Part of the handshake could be slightly Three Stooges. You know, you're doing the rising of the air, and then you do the octopus. Then you've got the lightning bolt, and you've got the navigation.
It's a whole skit.
Oh, by the way, there is a lot of esoteric symbolism to the circle, and a wheel is a circle.
Yep.
Fire. Lightning bolt is fire.
Lightning bolt is fire.
Yep.
I love this.
And everything changed.
And we've just introduced alchemy to our new society. So, this was fun, right?
Yeah.
So, this is why I love being involved in these orders, because they add richness and texture to life. I mean, the original reason why I got involved in Masonry at first and then later Oddfellows was there are many of the most important things in human existence that if you convey them with rigorous language, they're received dead on arrival. Sometimes poetry is necessary for improving the lot of the human condition. And unfortunately, one of the downsides of the modern era has been our focus on precision engineering in order to build a more advanced, more sophisticated world of AI construction, print on demand 3D objects. This is the world we live in that was built by a world that sought precision at all costs. And what we're finding in the advent of all of these amazing technologies is that what we're missing is ourselves. We're missing our humanity. We're missing the art. And when I say we, I mean the collective humanity. This room's probably pretty good on the art part. This is one of the reasons why I got involved, was it was a way of sharing that love and opportunity that life is. It's like the memento mori. It was the urgency of life. Don't ever forget that. I mean, it's amazing how arbitrary people blip out of existence. And a lot of us were reminded of that, and that's one of the things that we found helping rebuild the Oddfellows after the pandemic, has been that the experience of the pandemic reminded us how much we miss each other and how much we really need each other to live well. And so adding structure to that and knowing that there are people out there that would wish we didn't have this power. When we're banded together, we are mighty. Alone, we are impoverished. So this is why I put this together, was I wanted to share this beautiful world with all of you. And I think, any questions? And if you have any answers for me, I'd love those.
42.
Asterisk in ASCII. Very good.
We still need to create an initiation ritual.
The point of this was not to have one ready by the end of the lecture. I'm glad you think that I'm capable of that, but this is about getting the ball rolling.
And do a part 2 next year.
There was an interesting point that was brought up earlier about having a handshake that was getting quite complicated. And I just wanted to mention that the purpose of the handshake was for two people to greet each other, and they would know each other were members without anyone around them knowing that each other knew that they were members. So you have a handshake that is something beyond what looks like a normal handshake, except maybe a finger is in a weird spot. Everyone is going to see that. They're all going to know, oh, look, they're doing something now.
It's sort of like
So-
the handshake and then lean in and whisper, "Hail Hydra."
So people, it's like objectivist right there. So
I'm just, that
So-
was a more concrete example from recent pop culture.
it definitely is, and this is something where I hope you take away from this, being able to identify kind of the structures at play when we see these things in fiction or, unfortunately, non-fiction play out around us. And when people ask me about secret handshakes, there's two ways I greet them. One is I say, "Oh, you mean this one?" Which of course defeats the purpose of what you're saying about something discreet. Or the other one is... Because everyone wants to know the handshakes, and if you want to know them, you can Google it and you'll have them all. But you won't have the bond they represent. And that's the most important part of all. And it's funny, it's like I was down, I think it was in Irvine on the beach, and there was this fellow who saw my Masonic bolo tie, and it was something where he saw it and it's like, "Oh, you're a Mason, I know all the secrets," and he proceeded to give me a bunch of random handshakes from myriad degrees that were like, it's like, you don't know, it's like, yes, these are handshakes, but what they represent is lost on you. You have the signifier, not the actual thing it's trying to point out. You know, the point of Zen poetry is to point to enlightenment, not be enlightenment. It's like, I have the poem, I'm enlightened now.
I think he was showing that he was a researcher,
right? No, he seemed a little sketch.
It is Irvine.
So he might have been clever, he just didn't get it.
Yeah, I checked and he was not. Okay, what's up?
Could you speak maybe about the idea in a more modern context, whether it be this timeline or some other timeline, the difference between a secret society that its existence is supposed to be a secret versus a secret society where everyone knows that they're there, but what they do, whoa, who the heck knows?
So what you highlight is the difference that is frequently described as, are you a secret society or a society of secrets? And that discrepancy is more of a modern development, because originally the reason why the secrecy was there was very relevant to your own well-being and survival. And as society progressed and it was easier to be public about being a Mason, an Oddfellow, or what have you, we kind of forgot that the reason those things are there is for a purpose that if ever darkness were to fall on the land again, We actually already have the structures of our own survival and rebuilding with us. And that is another thing that had me dive more deeply into fraternalism after 2016 for obvious reasons, is that I saw the social capital collapsing around me. And what's interesting is a lot of people kind of become deeply resigned about what can I do to try and change the world around me. And what's interesting about these esoteric orders, however zany they may be, they offer a way of trying to take ground against seemingly insurmountable odds. It's at that very beginning where we talked about we versus the world versus I versus the world. We are going to have a better chance. And by finding a group that you can band together with and promote eusocial behavior and however you want to pursue it, you end up taking ground that ground is something that you can contribute to the world. And it's something that no matter how dire things might come down from courts, from elections, what have you, you know you're making the difference because you live it.
I already know the answer, but I kind of want to pretend I just asked a question that would give you a chance to explain where that graph came from of the social capital curve.
Oh, social capital. If you want to know more on that topic, this is the textbook. It's called The Upswing. It's by the author of Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam, and he used, as he describes them, rare data sets to figure out how we built so much social capital in the mid-20th century that allowed for all these breakthroughs in women and minorities' rights to take place in the US. And what he found in those rare data sets was that the foundation of all progress in the 20th century, from the progressive movement to the civil rights movement and women's rights movement, were all founded on the building of that social capital, that interconnectedness. And just as an example of how important that is, if you're in a society where most of the people in there are mostly your same ideological persuasion, if you have a couple of people who are a bridge to another group that is a different ideological persuasion, what ends up happening is that those groups have a way of mixing their waters, so to speak. Cross-pollinating. And what that does is it moderates the dyspepsia of polarization. And it's interesting because one of the groups I had on that Venn diagram was the Knights of Columbus over here on the objectivist side, which was the Catholic Church realized that so many people loved Freemasonry, they created a certified knockoff of it that was entirely subject to the church's mandates.
Yep.
So it was something where, yes, we'll allow you to play citizen, but if you get out of line. And that is something that has gotten less because as the order has shrunk quite a bit, but it's still out there. And those people who are still involved are much more towards the citizen side of that graph than they were 150 years ago. But at the same time, it's important to recognize kind of the forces at play so that you can continue to move things towards that subjectivist reality that allows us to build things together rather than one of us winning and dominating the other.
Also, does the book also describe or analyze what started the downturn of that social capitalism, like at the height there?
Yes, it does break that down, and the key thing is the attitude of me first. It's the idea of why would I give my time to a social order that would take time that I could be playing video games, that I could be watching television. As in Masonry, there's a common trope that people say is that the death knell of Masonry was Monday Night Football. But it's the truth of the matter is that if people want to make a difference in the world, there's a cost to that. And if you want to tune out the world and just kind of be comfortably numb, you can do that, but there is a cost to that too. and it's a pretty severe one in my estimation.
Can you tell us more about your robe? That is absolutely beautiful.
Okay, question for robe, and then we'll do a dollar bill. Do we have time for that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the
Good.
robe, this is from Kashmir, northernmost province of India, or northernmost province of Pakistan, depending on who you ask. And this is all hand embroidered. It is by far the most expensive thing that I own, and I wear it only for the most special occasions because, as I like to say, I like to show my respect for others by being somebody easier on the eyes for others to look at. And this fez, this is from Cairo in Egypt, from the oldest fez manufacturer on the planet, 600 years of experience.
Fezzes are cool.
Because fezzes are cool.
Is that official garb for Masons or Odd Fellows or both?
I'm an odd Mason and a free fellow. Perfect for me. Okay, so let's do that dollar bill. This is one of my favorite story time moments. Many of my hats, I have a folded up $1 bill in the back, which features this. Adios. So you have a couple of basic symbols here, and this is not a Masonic symbol. It's from kind of the realm of symbolism and esoterica, which was just fantastically popular in the 18th century. So there's a lot of people who were never in any initiated order who knew lots about it. Like, I've met people online that seem to know a lot about it, but they are not a member of anything, just because they've read a lot. Same thing back here. So what you have here is that all-seeing eye of providence, and again, that esoteric interpretation of the divinity of God taking a passive role, being proud of you coming of age. When did we come of age? Oh, look, 1776, right there on the first stage of this pyramid. And so what was this thing that God was looking over? Okay, Annat Septus Novus Ordo Seclorum. Okay, the New World Order. Annat Septus means providence approves. One of the other names for the all-seeing eye is the all-seeing eye of providence. You know, it sees the future, it sees the past, it sees the present in perfect clarity. And what this is a passive deity saying, I have done my part. I have given you everything you need to succeed. My intention is by letting go of the reins is that I know by seeing the future that you will get through the travails and tragedies that are before you to become the creatures I longed you to become. And there's this aspirational, progressive view of human existence inherent in this symbol. So Providence approves of this. And what is this? This is the new order of the ages. And what is that new order? And it's encased in the symbolism of the unfinished pyramid. Because whenever you see a pyramid in esoteric circles, it almost inevitably has the same meaning across cultures. This is one of those weird things where there's just a lot of agreement around this, where people look at, you know, shapes and go, I think that means that. You think that too? Hey, oh, I guess we must be right. So you have the square base of the pyramid. The square, just like in the square and compass, represents the material world, the flat earth, so to speak. Symbolic, not literal. So the symbolic world is in this world of our physical secular reality. And what you have is you're building, you have the edges of the pyramid form triangle, 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 triangle. Things in sets of threes pertain to the divine. Trinity, you hear it in a lot of different religions, but those sets of threes, it's about the divine breaking the fact that our human perception is almost inevitably this, not that. It's always a 1 or a 0. That's the way our minds work. So when you're presented with a triple rather than a double, it's seen as divine because you're breaking that polarity that tears us apart, but is also a feature of our perception. And so by viewing the world through that triple, you are seeking to overcome the limits of the secular, four-sided world and strive towards the divine. But the divine's up here. We're never going to be like, ascended, light everywhere. That's not something that we have access to. But we do have access to working on the secular world, and every single layer of the pyramid, it's always going to be a square from above. It's always going to be this lived reality we're in. But if we're building pyramids, we're building something towards the divine. And that's the symbol of this, is that we are always going to be building a secular society, but it shouldn't be one that ends there. It should be one that begins there with the inquiry of how do we get beyond ourselves? How can we act in a way that has, daddy divinity up here be proud of what we've done?
Well, it's very similar to the Kabbalistic tree of life, where you've got Keter at the top, and that's the all unknowable, and then it breaks down to Bina and Chokhmah, the dynamic and receptive, so to speak, aspects of divinity. You've got that.
Those, if you are at least passingly familiar with Kabbalah, could you raise your hand? Just want to see. Okay, so just a few of you. The main thing about it is, okay, wake up. The main thing about it is that in those pluralistic circumstances of the Oddfellows and the Masons, you had Kabbalists talking with people who were Christian, but they were not necessarily people beholden to the church. So a lot of Christian mysticism tradition comes from the fruitful discourse between these people in the safety and secrecy of secret societies. And getting back to the point, it's like we still have these nominally secret societies among us, but their point, what they do in life, what they do for the world is different. And will it change if the world changes? Yes, they might become secret again, where recognizing a brother in the darkness or in the light may become a matter of life or death. I certainly sincere that isn't the case, but there are places around the world, such as the Grand Lodge of Ukraine, the Grand Lodge of Russia, the Grand Lodge of Lebanon. All of these actively work in darkness, because if they were discovered by their governments, they would be arrested. In Ukraine, fortunately, the brothers that we know of there have been taken away from the front, but if they were discovered by the Russians, they would be severely punished. So.
I have another question that's totally unrelated. You mentioned in one of your slides about the two sides of, I don't remember it now, there's the edify and the benightify.
Benightify, plunge into darkness.
Plunge into darkness, and then in the parentheses they talked about antisocial behavior versus positive behavior. Is there a delineation between antisocial behavior and introverted behavior and then positive? Because there are a lot of places where being introverted is considered as being antisocial. But that's not necessarily true.
Antisocial in this context means destructive to human life, liberty, or well-being. It's not antisocial in the sense of, I need to peace out right now. Because it's like, I am naturally an introvert who plays an extrovert really well on TV. And so it's like, after this, I am going to be like the wilted flower.
So you mean like counter-social?
Yeah.
Meaning actively working against it versus simply being a part of it.
I like your distinction. I think I'll steal that. Okay?
Just going to point out that you don't have to be esoteric to believe these things. I kept hearing echoes of my friends being in the boatmen's union.
Yes, I'm also the treasurer for my union, and one of the interesting things that I'm working with them on is reintroducing the initiation ritual that they used to have some decades back, where when people would join the union, there would be a special ceremony that would bring them into the union and kind of drive home the value of it.
It looks like they're getting ready for.
It's 2 minutes until.
2 minutes till what?
until
The next
the next
session.
session.
We were supposed to wrap up 10 minutes before that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll say it's time.